What's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in to The Standard. Today, I'm going to talk about the issues that we've been dealing with, soft tissue injuries and pain that we get with our young athletes and the protocols that they're being told to do and how it's slowing down or limiting the healing process. And then when we're coming back to sport, just the struggles we deal with. On a lot of injuries, like we don't love ice. And we've talked about this in a bunch of posts, but I kind of wanted to elaborate a little bit. And there's a bunch of research coming out now, and I know it can go either way, but where we've seen the most success is no ice unless we have a lot of pain. If we have a lot of pain, like right after the injury, then we can ice it and we can help limit the pain. But if you can get away without icing it, we want that inflammation. We want the body to actually heal itself. And the ice is kind of really slowed down, sometimes like an entire week of the healing process for us. So some things that we would like to do is like we'll literally rub the swelling up towards the heart, try to help the lymphatic system and try to help get that swelling out of there faster, but while still doing its job, not inhibiting that inflammatory process. And when we get to start moving, we want the collagen and we want that remodeling phase to happen as fast as we possibly can. And if we just ice, we just rest, and we just sit there for a long time, we've just noticed, through the years that really slows down the process. And then when we come back into our sport or competition, we just don't feel the same. And sometimes we'll never feel the same, or it just takes too long to get back to where we're at. So we want the healing process to kind of work through it and help the body and do what it's supposed to do instead of us stepping in too much. What we like, so if it's a hamstring or even if you have knee pain or, again, you roll your ankle. So these are some big common things that we see with most of our athletes. I've talked about it a bunch, but we want to start moving as close to the sport as fast as we possibly can, even with, say, a high ankle sprain, where we know we're worried about, maybe where there can be separation in the tib fib or anything like that. We don't want to stress it and go backwards, but if we can start walking as close to our normal gait pattern faster, that's what we want to do. If we have just a rolled ankle and it's swelling and we can get into the pool, or we can do some assisted mini plyos or jumps or a walking dribble, we're noticing that the gait comes back faster and more normal than it's supposed to. It also helps build a ton of confidence in the athlete. If you've had an injury and you just sit for 2 weeks, then it's like, okay, hey, now go try it again. You step back, like nothing has changed. You've just been immobilized for 2 weeks, and then it's like, oh, let's go try it again. And we just see that happen so many times, to where that's just been an issue for us. So we want to push intensity all the time. For what we're thinking about is, what are the demands of the sport? So if you're a high school receiver and you have to be able to sprint as fast as you can, stop on a dime, cut, come back 180 degrees. Okay, what do we have to start doing to be able to get into there? So there's range of motion qualities that we have to get back. There's strengthening qualities that we have to get back. Even just the recoordination patterns, because you sometimes we start avoiding it, and the way that our body's moving changes. So we have to, reteach the body how to start moving how it's supposed to again. And then how do we start getting to those intensities as fast as we can? So each day, we just try to build up to see how far we can go. At the beginning, it might be a walk. At the beginning, it literally might be where we can't even put weight on it, but to where we're going to move the ankle or we're going to move the knee in positions that mimic close to us standing up. And then the next day, we build on that, and the next day, we build on that. If we go one day where it's a little too far, the next day, then if we have to bring it down, okay, we know we did something else. We try to document and track everything, where it's like, okay, what did we do that maybe went too far? Okay, we make that adjustment, and then we just start building again. And we see a ton of success like that. What we get all the time, and I understand it's tough with trainers and therapists and coaches. There's always so many different lines of communication. Everybody's in their own silo, so I understand a lot of it is like, okay, what can I do to make sure this athlete just doesn't get hurt again? But to where they're like, hey, I'm having knee pain. I'm not supposed to do legs for the next 2 weeks. Or, hey, I tweaked my hamstring. I'm just not going to do any legs for 2 weeks. I'm just going to stretch, and then I'm going to go try to sprint again and get back to my sport and try to play soccer again. That works 0% of the time. If you just rest for 2 weeks on a hamstring and then you try to go sprint again and you haven't exposed that to any high-intensity movements or to that high-velocity movement, the hamstring's just going to pull again. So we have to stop that just rest, immobilize, ice, sit, that protocol. That protocol doesn't work. And I think that we still have so much to learn on it, but the more we move an athlete early at the beginning, the faster we're going to get them back, and more importantly, the more success we're going to have and the more confidence they're going to have in their sport. And that's where, for us, I really feel like it's been an absolute game changer for us, for even our healthy athletes. Now we know how to progress and regress everything, to where if we're having some anterior knee pain and we're supposed to squat that day, what's a plan B that we can get for that squat to where we can still mimic, we're still trying to get lower body strength or maximal strength to where we can still mimic, okay, the outcomes that we want, but we just make an adjustment to where we can do this in a pain-free or a really low minimal pain-free environment. That's where we get wins. A hamstring we had, guy tweaked his hamstring, had a bunch of guys on his team. Same thing. They've been dealing with it for 2 weeks. It was reoccurring, all these different issues. So when he came to us, he's like, hey, I got to get back on the field. I have a huge scrimmage for me to be able to make the starting roster. I got to be able to do this. And it was about 2 weeks. So the first thing I had to figure out was like, okay, where's it coming from? Because it was from a normal sprint. So watching the film on his movement, it's like, okay, is it coming from the ankle? Is it coming from the hip? Is it coming from the knee? Or was there a weird movement when he was sprinting right there? So instead of just focusing on the hamstring, I went and attacked the hips and the feet. You could tell that his talus was locked up, and then there were some issues going on with his hip where it was just some control. Whether that was pre or post hamstring, I don't know, but I went and attacked those. And while we're doing that, we're training every other body part that he has for trying to get the crossover effect. So we're trying to train as aggressive as we can that mimics what he's supposed to be doing in practice and sport in the weight room, and then trying to push the intensity on the hamstring. It started off with a walking dribble. The next day, we were able to actually start turning it up, and each day we built it up. Within 10 days, he recovered. We made sure that we focused on what the pelvic positioning when he was sprinting, to where when he went back to his sport, that the mechanics were better. We don't always know if they'll transfer, but luckily they did, or at least we think they did, because he hasn't had a re-injury. But we mimicked his sport demands as fast as we can each day, attacked every other component of the system and of his body, and then he was able to come back way faster than the guys that had an injury before him, to where it even caused some guys in-house to be frustrated because they were wondering why he was back and other guys weren't. And it wasn't because we did anything special. We just tried to mimic his sport demands. And I've done it the wrong way too years ago, where it's like stretch this, RDLs, strengthen it, Nordic curls. Nothing is going to strengthen a hamstring better than sprinting at high velocities. Doesn't mean you don't do strength work in the weight room, but if you don't expose that hamstring to high velocity before they go back to return to sport, you're gonna have a re-injury every single time, and that's where we try to focus on. And again, it's the same thing with an ankle. If you have knee pain, like every growing athlete that we have, not everyone, but at some point probably has some anterior knee pain, it's coming from somewhere else. It's because if it's just referring and there was no traumatic, you didn't twist it, there's not an ACL, but you just have anterior knee pain, there's something going on with your ankle. There's something going on with your tib fib. Your hip is not being able to stabilize and control and attenuate the force that's coming through the ground. Something is happening there. So if you're having knee pain, the quad might be, really shortened and tight, pulling the patella up and underactive. So it's weak at the same time, which we see all the time, where we really attack the quad and we can get the pain to go away from the knee. If you're having knee pain, resting and not doing legs, just saying, hey, I'm not going to lift for 2 weeks, or hey, I can't do any lower body movement, or hey, I can't do this, but you can practice, which makes zero sense. That pain's always going to stay. We have to figure out the driver, and we have to figure out how to attack everything around it. So if you have knee pain, figure out what you can do as close to what you're supposed to do for your sport and your practice, and really attack everything above and below that. And we see a ton of success with that. And again, we don't know everything, but everything that we're learning and that we're seeing with our athletes, the more that we stay myopic, so the more acute that we just look at the injury, the less success we have. So what I mean is if we have just an elbow injury or we have just a hamstring injury, we only look at the hamstring and we just try to attack that, we're going to hurt something else throughout the process because we're not focusing on it, or we're not figuring out the driver for that. And we got to make sure, that we figure out the driver every single time. So again, back to the intensity. That's the whole staple of really our entire training program, whether you're healthy or not. So whether it's performance or return to play, but we're always trying to build intensity. We're always trying to get to or above the stimulus that we're going to have in our sport. So when we have an injury, we got to do the same thing. The only difference is it's just a slower progression. So it might take us longer to move from A to B to C to D compared to if somebody's healthy. But it's the same thing. You just got to be patient. You got to make sure that you don't push yourself or push your athlete past that injury protocol. But if you do that and you're just breaking down the movement for their position and specifically to what they have to do on the court or on the field, that's where you're going to have a ton of success. I think about it all the time, and I used to think about it too before we really got into the return to play about 8 years ago, was all these pro athletes would come back way faster than any athletes that we have, and people are like, oh, they just have the best training staffs, which usually they do, or they're just built differently, they have freak athletes. Well, it's because it's always life or death with them. The more games they miss, the more money it costs them, the more chance they have not to be able to be on the squad next year, and they're so competitive, they just want to go and win. the biggest thing that I've learned from is those athletes, from the moment they have the injury, they're doing everything they can possibly all day, every day to be able to get back to their sport. They're pushing that intensity. With us, with school, with our demands, and we don't get paid to play our sport a lot of times right now, I understand that we might not be able to be as intensive as that, but we can still try to get to as close to that as we possibly can. And that's really what we've tried to mimic. And we've had tons of trainers and therapists and performance coaches help us across the country talk to us about what they do. And it's always super simple, but it's super aggressive on the foundational movements and progressing those every single day instead of just sitting in the same phase for a long period of time, which is crazy to me that I still see that all the time, where I get an athlete just comes up into the weight room and they're like, hey, I was told by my doctor, or I was told by somebody that just said, hey, I have, my calf's bugging me or my knee's bugging me and I just can't do anything for 2 weeks. I know I keep beating that up, but it's like a hot topic for me right now. It's a frustration point for us. I'm just a strength coach. So if I tell them to do something else, then, I could get in trouble. And a bunch of that's on me too. I should have better communication. But if I'm an athlete, I'm trying to do whatever I can to get back onto the field. And sitting and resting and doing nothing or just hitting some buys and some tries, it's not going to get me back to where I want to be. And I want to control and do everything that I possibly can to get back to that. So again, on the ramp, if you have a soft tissue injury, not something to where broken bones different, torn ACL is different, torn ligament, you have to have surgery. That's different. If you need imaging, that's different. But if you do get imaging and you are healthy and you can start, realigning the collagen fibers or getting the body to start working the way that it's supposed to, start pushing the intensity as best you possibly can. I think a little pain is okay. I think it's more of the brain telling you that there's threat. So if you can push it to a 1 to 2 on a pain scale, sometimes we hear guys maybe even 3, 4, some say no pain. I think it's kind of where you're at. The way that we know where we're winning on that is if the next day we can keep moving forward. If the next day we feel like we've gone backwards, we know we did too much the day before, and then it's just readjust and then go again. The recovery process is never just linear. It's not just like, oh, you went here, straight to here. Sometimes you get lucky, but usually it's like, do good, okay, a little bit, do good, okay, a little bit. What we don't want is this, straight up and down in a roller coaster to where you never even get back to your baseline, and that's what we want to do. And if you do have a torn ACL and if you do have a severe injury, it's the same thing. It's just even a slower process. Now, you got to be really careful. You got to really know the healing process on timelines with ligaments and if there's a meniscal injury, all these different things, but it's the same thing. We got to just gradually push intensity and mimic the demands of their sport as early as we possibly can. I think if you do that, you're going to have a ton of success. And I think if you do that, as a team too, with training staffs, with the coaching staff, and if you get full buy-in, it's going to limit the amount of times that your athlete or one of your players is missing practice and missing competition, which we know anytime that you're missing competition, it's going to hurt the team as far as wins go. So if you have an injury, go attack it. Don't sit. Don't rest. If you can do anything, try not to immobilize it. Try not to boot it up. If you're squatting with an ankle brace on, you got to know that you're not going to get any range of motion. You're going to be compensating all over the place. You're going to have a different injury throughout the chain. You really got to just think practically and logically about what's going on and how you can start pushing that to try to get back to your sport. Appreciate you guys. I know I rambled there and bounced back and forth, but again, huge hot topic for us. We get a lot of flack on it. We still don't know everything on it, but I know, and through the hundreds and hundreds of athletes, the more we can push intensity, the more we can mimic to what they're doing in their sport, the more success we're going to have every single time. Appreciate you guys listening. Thanks.